Hello everyone, Orientation in the Teaching Profession. Welcome to week 4. I hope it's kind of cloudy and cold here, so I hope wherever you are nice and warm. I wanted to touch base, I've got a list. I want to touch base on a number of things, but we're going to talk about the specifics for the interviews and observations is one of the main things that we're going to talk about, but there are a number of other things that I wanted to touch base on as well. The first thing I wanted to wish you was, for those of you who, today's the 17th of September, but the 16th of September is actually Mexican Independence Day. And so I wanted to wish you a happy Mexican Independence Day, the 16 de septiembre, for those of you who celebrate. And I wanted to share, for Mexican Independence Day, I brought some traditional Mexican candy that, I don't know if maybe some of you are familiar with some of this, but anyways, dubalines, which are like hazelnut and cream, and you scoop them out with these little paddles. And then these are called semáforos, and they're lollipops, and semáforo is stoplight in English. And then some little Mexican flags, coconut from coco, and then these, which I could easily founder on, pulparindo, and it's tamarindo. It's a fruit. I have no idea. Quince, I think maybe it's quince in English, and it's with chile and salt. A lot of Mexican candy is, well, everything has, a lot of it has chile, but a lot of it starts as a fruit and goes to and then includes chile. So I brought these for a class, and I wanted to share. I lived in Mexico when I was, why this is a really, one of the reasons why this is a really important date for me is I lived in Mexico when I was 16 in 1984 and 85. And so I posted on Facebook some pictures of that time because it's such a, it was, as I wrote, I had no idea what a huge impact, at the time, I had no idea what a huge impact that would have on my life, and that between living in Mexico and learning Spanish, and now I cannot fathom my life without either of those things. But I thought I'd share a picture. Sharing a picture of oneself from the 80s is really never a good thing. But, so these are some friends from when I was living. I went to Instituto La Salle when I was living in Mexico. And so I just wanted to share some pictures from that time in honor of Mexican Independence Day. We went camping in the Sierra. I lived in Chihuahua, the city of Chihuahua, camping with some friends, and this was my 17th birthday party. And so, anyways, in honor of Mexican Independence Day, I just wanted to share that with you. A couple of other things that I wanted to share was when you read about, I got all my little stuff here. When you read in Freedom Within Structure, Teaching with Stones, I wanted to show you, because like when you run around and you teach a bunch of different places. So this is how I carry those stones, is just like this. So, these are the glass beads. So the glass beads stay, here's the glass beads, and they just, because I run around to different classrooms in different places, they just live in here. It works beautifully for when you have to run around to lots of different places. So I wanted to share that with you. And then I kind of swap those out. And I also, I just keep the stones in a bowl, which I'll bring to the classroom. And sometimes, it just makes me happy to look at, actually. But sometimes even when we aren't doing something technically with the stones, I'll just, if you put these out or the glass beads out on people's desks of any age, it just seems to be a very soothing thing. And so the only rule that I learned, because I didn't know it the first time I did it, was people can hold these. People can, make designs with them. People make, designs with these on their desk. There's two rules. No throwing. I did think about that the first time. And no, tapping, sometimes people will be thinking and they'll be tapping on their desk and not realize that they're doing it. So those are just, if that's something you want to play with, I would just advise that you include those two rules before you pass them out. But I wanted to share those with you. Someone asked me, well, Dawn, you didn't do a book share. And I realized that I don't think I did. And so I wanted to share my book, even though we did it a couple of years ago. And, as many of you wrote, It's so hard to choose one. I mean, you could, all of us, I think, could bring stacks. But the one that I chose is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's a spiritual path to higher creativity. Look, it's like well worn. And I stumbled upon this book. Oof. Let's see, my youngest child is 15, so it would be 15 years ago, because I stumbled upon this when my youngest was 6 months, and then the next one was a year and a half, and the next one was 2.5. And it was a very busy, having 3 kids in 3.5 years, for those of you who haven't had children yet, it is an intense experience. And I was home at that time, full time, and so it was like my whole world was really wrapped up in caring for toddlers and babies, and everything else seemed to get pushed out of the way. And someone recommended this book, and I read it, and it was like suddenly I could breathe deeply in ways that I had not been able to. And from this book, and I also started writing, and as soon as I started writing, it was like, oh, this is what I was born to do. And somehow that the combination of writing and teaching, for those of you who have other passions, who think it's either all teaching or all something else, in my experience, though teaching and your other passions really work beautifully together, and it took me a long time to kind of come to terms with that. I got out of education entirely and focused exclusively on writing for a number of years, and I so missed teaching. And so then when I came back into education, whereas in ed before I had really kept my writing life out of it, that whole sense of separation really was false, and it made me feel fractured and fragmented. And so when I came back into ed here at Santa Fe Community College and in other realms, I decided that I wasn't going to have my writing life and my teaching life, just like I don't have my parenting life and my life as a daughter and my life as a wife and my life as as a mother and as a sister. All those things all actually really mutually reinforce each other and strengthen each other. So when I came back in, I decided to bring the full, my full areas that I love and that I'm passionate about. What came from this book was actually I wrote a novel, Meadowlark, and this just came out last year. You've already read chapters from Teaching Passionately, co-written with my mother, Joan Wink. This is a piece of fiction, very roughly based on some stories that I heard about my great-grandmother, Grace, that I grew up with, and this is actually a photo of the ranch in South Dakota where this all takes place. That ranch in South Dakota is still in our family, and it takes place at the turn of this century. And some stories that I had heard when I was growing up that all of a sudden as an adult I said, wait a minute. And I had some questions from my mom about some things, and she said, I don't know, but I've always wondered. And so I wrote a book to find out. And so anyways, I wanted to share that with you from Bookshare. Thank you for those of you who asked, because I had forgotten to do that. Okay, interviews and observations. The specifics for interviews and observations. So the observations, remember, are through the lens of what do you observe? And, actually I talked about a lot of this earlier, but what did you notice? And through the lens of transmission, generative, and transformative. The observations, you asked what you really wanted to know. The questions are based on what you really wanted to know. Now, what is the format that you write them up? The format is, and people do things in different ways. You can either do them individually, like have a section on one interview and another section on another interview, another section on the observation. They tend to be around 3 to 4 pages each. If you would like to weave them all together, go for it. And then it would probably be, 10-ish, 12-ish pages around that. Yes, double spaced, please. Yes, typed. Yes, double spaced. The big thing with the interviews is do not transcribe. Do not transcribe. In fact, I feel so strongly about this because somehow every semester, even though no matter how much I say it, people will still submit like a transcription of the interview. Do not transcribe the interview. That tells me nothing. It has nothing to do with what you learned or what you took away or the questions you have. Write up what you learned. So the whole intention of the interviews and the observations, write up what you learned. What did you take away from it? Questions. What did it make you feel? What did it make you think? What ideas? What do you want to do in your own teaching life? What do you never want to do in your own teaching life? What were some surprises? So that is how you're, and whether you do it individually or holistically, the total is going to be about 10 to 12 pages. I hope this helps. I really look forward to reading your thoughts and your experiences, and that is due this upcoming Sunday. I wanted to share with you for one of those treasured books that I reach for again and again and again. This is Jonathan Kozol. Please do Google him. I have actually other books of his on my shelf. I have a bunch of them, but some of his other, this is Letters to a Young Teacher. Some of his others are Savage Inequalities, and here's a picture of him speaking, taped to the front of that book, which goes back on the shelf. The Shame of a Nation is another one that he is known for. And so please do Google him. But I just wanted to read you, this is about, remember, this is about one of his first days teaching, and we read from I'm blanking on it, from Teacher Man Frank McCourt about his first day teaching. So I just wanted to share another one, and this is Letters to a Young Teacher. And because I'm such a literary geek, I asked him to sign my book, and he did. So that was way cool, because like I say, total literary groupie. Okay, and he's pretty amazing, so please do Google him and read about him, and share anything that you learn. So this talks about when he dives into his first day, and this started, a new teacher, Francesca, wrote to him, and this is what he writes back. Dear Francesca, I am very happy that you wrote to me, and I apologize for taking 2 weeks to reply. I was visiting schools in other cities in the first part of the month, and I didn't have a chance to read your letter carefully until tonight. The answer to your question is that I would love to come and visit your classroom, and I'm glad that you invited me. Sometimes, and let me see, I wanted to jump to, I think that teaching is a beautiful profession, and that teachers of young children do one of the best things that there is to do in life: bring joy and beauty, mystery and mischievous delight into the hearts of little people in their years of greatest curiosity. And I would say for high schoolers and older people as well. Sometimes when I'm visiting a school, a teacher whom I may have met once when she was in college, or with whom I may have corresponded briefly, or a teacher whom I've never met but who's read one of my books and feels as if she knows me, sees me standing in the corridor and comes right up and says, "Come and visit my classroom." I love it when teachers let me do this, but I almost always do it wrong first, because it's been a long time since I was a teacher, and I often ask the kind of question that gets everybody jumping from their seats and speaking out at the same time. So then she asks him about his first day in school that he ever taught. So he tells her, the truthful answer is, I was terrified, even more than you were on my first day at school, because I had no preparation as a teacher. I had gone to Harvard College, where I was a literature major, and then I had studied briefly as a Rhodes Scholar in England, and had lived in Paris and had studied writing in the company of older writers who were living there. When I came back to the United States and decided I'd like to teach in public school, I knew nothing about teaching and had never had a class in education. But my lack of qualifications didn't seem to matter to officials in the Boston public schools, who were desperate to hire anyone who would agree to teach in one of Boston's poorest neighborhoods. So my application was approved without much questioning. And I'm wondering, some of you who are teaching on iLicense right now, if this sounds familiar. I found myself soon teaching. My school was a ghostly-looking, badly overcrowded, and physically decrepit building where my students couldn't even be provided with a classroom of their own. We had to share an undivided auditorium with 35 other children in another fourth grade class, and with a choral group and a sewing class, and with a group rehearsing almost all fall for a Christmas play that was somehow never produced. One windy afternoon that fall, a rotted frame of windows in our makeshift class collapsed. I was standing close enough to catch the frame before the glass could shatter on the children sitting beneath it. Some of the children seemed to have accepted these conditions, or at least did not appear to feel they had a right to question them. He talks about how he adds to the basal readers which he's forced to use, and the phonics lessons, and he talks about bringing in Paul Clay's Bird Garden instead. One of the things you'll hear, start out tough and stick to the prescribed curriculum. New teachers are too frequently advised. This, in my belief, is the worst possible advice. Establishing a chemistry of trust between the children and ourselves is a great deal more important than to charge into the next 3 chapters of the social studies text or package reading system or that we have been provided, the same one that was used without success by previous instructors. Instead, entrap them first in fascination, entrap them in a sense of merriment and hopeful expectations, entrap them in Paul Clay's bird gardens. I'll see you in class.